The gentlelady from New Mexico is recognized. Ms. Stansbury.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I find it extraordinarily distasteful and disrespectful when we call hearings about tribal issues and members of Congress use the space to talk about policy and political issues that are not about the issue at hand. I think it's disrespectful to our tribes. I think it's disrespectful to the leaders. I think it's disrespectful to the folks who serve our tribal governments, and I would like to, for one, actually get back to the issue at hand. I've heard some comments, questions about how tribal law enforcement works this morning, and Mr. Chairman, I would love to work with you on a bipartisan basis to maybe do a teach-in for members about how tribal law enforcement works. There's been a lot of questions about how funding works, about how jurisdictional issues work, about how legal issues work. These are incredibly complex issues, and it's important to have a hearing about it, but I think a setting in which we could really get in the weeds would be very helpful. But I do want to make a comment because there has been a few comments this morning that said, tell us how we can fix the issue without talking about funding. Well, that's like saying, how do we stop a fire without talking about water? Because the real issue is that we have been underfunding law enforcement and support for our tribes since treaties and trust responsibilities began between the US government and these tribal nations. And so we hear it literally every single day. Those of us who work with tribal governments, who work with our tribal nations, are telling us we need water to put out the fire. And the water, in this case, is the resources. So I'm gonna just use a few quick examples of tribes that I interact with on a day-to-day basis. The Navajo Nation, their tribal council just came to visit me a few days ago. They would like to renegotiate their law enforcement contract because they are underfunded. They do not have enough money through their contract to pay enough officers to patrol each of the areas that they need. That is in part just the history of that contract, but also because the population is growing, because the need is growing. You need water to put out the fire. That's how tribes use the money. They need it to hire law enforcement. But I also think it's important that we talk a little bit about these jurisdictional issues. Tribes are sovereign nations. They decide what happens on their lands. And I think it's important to take a moment because, Director, you brought it up a couple of times here today. It is up to a tribal nation if they decide they want to do direct service, they want to contract for the money, they want to hire their own officers, they want to have extra BIA officers on tribal lands. It's really up to each of these sovereign nations and their relationship with you all. But it's also up to them to decide whether or not they want to cross-deputize, whether they want to work with county law enforcement, they want to work with local municipals outside their reservation, they want to invite state police onto their reservation because they are their lands. And what we have seen, I think because there is a lack of understanding of tribal sovereignty, is that there has been a systematic effort for the last several decades to undermine tribal sovereignty, especially around law enforcement, and it is dangerous and resulted just 2 years ago in the Castro Huerta decision that the Supreme Court handed down, and which tribes across the country are asking us to address right now. So I wonder, Director, I'm grateful to hear that you served at a regional level because that level of expertise. Talk to us a little bit about, at the regional level, as working in the BIA bureaucracy with our tribal nations, about these sovereignty and jurisdictional issues. What can we do to, one, make sure more resources are reaching tribes at the ground, and two, that BIA is doing its part to address these jurisdictional issues and help support tribes as they seek help and accountability?
I would say that that BIA and tribal law enforcement agencies are at the bottom of the pecking order on the federal law enforcement. We don't get the respect that we deserve, and the tribes certainly don't get the respect they deserve. We're oftentimes up to their whim, what they want to pursue, not what the tribe wants to pursue and not what we want to pursue, but what they think is important, because we don't take these cases to federal court. That's another agency within the government. And so that makes it difficult. As for putting the fire out, you're absolutely correct. I've been around a long time, and I figured out early in my career, here's what I'm going to get. I'm going to have to figure out how to make it work. It would be great at one time to not have to think that way, and maybe I'm not the right guy for the job because I've always thought that way, and it's like, yeah, we're at 13%. What the hell can we do? And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Director. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hope we can work together to put the fire out.